Claude can help with 4 very different kinds of work. It can follow a reusable procedure from a skill, and in Cowork, it can plan and complete several steps across the tools you approve on an ongoing basis. When you place those 4 outputs beside each other, it can look like Claude becomes more intelligent at every level. But that's not what really changes here. The model may be the same, but the difference is what survives after the current prompt. So in this video, I'm going to take one fictional 5-person agency called Meridian Creative from a vague service idea to a bounded weekly workflow. At level 1, Claude only needs to hold the current task. At level 2, it needs to hold the agency's context. At level 3, it needs to preserve a decision method. And at level 4, it needs to execute a carefully scoped job across approved tools. Now, this latter is my teaching model. It's not an official scale from Anthropic, and the goal is not to reach level 4. Rather, the goal is to stop rebuilding the same parts of your work while avoiding complexity and access you do not need. And by the end, you'll be a pro at using Claude, and you can use it for any workflow that you need. Let's start with the lightest possible setup, a blank chat. Okay, so here we are in a blank chat. I'm not in a project, I'm just in a chat itself. Well, we'll start very simple here. And the first thing what we want to do is ask it to do something very vague. So help me
What did he say?
help me launch a podcast repurposing service. You can see here that obviously it'll come up with something that probably is hallucinated or doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially for our use case. You'll actually start seeing here that it goes through and starts to fetch things from my Notion, which is not what I want. And it's starting to do things that we probably, that I didn't instruct it to. And because I have Claude set up on a bunch of different projects already, it tries to go through and make the best sense of what I'm trying to ask it for using instructions that it already has. So it's obviously not doing it what I want to begin with. And you may run into this problem if you've used Claude before and you've connected a bunch of stuff. For example, I've connected Notion, which is why it starts to look there to begin with. Now, I'll start a new chat and then I'll ask it something that makes a little bit more sense and is a bit more reasonable. I'm going to ask it, I run a fictional 5-person creative agency and we need to allocate no more than 36 combined team hours, so on and so forth. And you'll see here that I ask it for a plan and then I ask it to have project instructions for Meridian Creative, okay? So I give it a lot of context here. You'll see, firstly, it'll be able to answer this a lot faster. Secondly, it's not going into random rabbit holes that it doesn't need to get the answer for me. So it even gives me the option to do quick answer. I think this is a new thing that Claude has been adding recently, to use a cheaper model when it realizes that whatever you're asking it doesn't require something super complex. So you'll see here, it comes up with something that makes a little bit more sense for me, which is great. I can start to use this. And because I gave it context, I was able to benefit from it. This is what a normal prompt would look like. And this is what you would consider a good prompt engineering prompt, where you put together a prompt that has a lot of detail and an expectation as to what you want to receive from the AI agent. The next thing that we want to do is create a project, right? So in the intro, I talked a little bit about the second level being project, where it's scoped to your workspace. So I've already got tons of projects here. I'll create a new one, Meridian Creative. And then inside of this project, you can click create project, and then you can give it a few different things. Firstly, instruction, memory, context, so on and so forth, okay? The one thing that I really like that Claude can do is it separates memory from context and instructions, okay? Context, you can include PDFs, documents, PowerPoint presentations, whatever you want. And memory, you can ask it across chats to save things into its memory as time goes on. So let's say I was working with Meridian Creative and this was a shared Gmail account or whatever that's logged into Claude, and I share it with all of my teammates. They could do their chats within the project and have full context, and then once they find something very useful, tell Claude to save it into memory. So all I'm going to do here to get this project set up is open up instructions and then paste this in. This was at the bottom of our first prompt here. So project instructions, Meridian Creative, your decision to support analysts, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Save those instructions. It gives it full context now. Okay, so all I'm gonna do here is copy the first portion of the prompt, the second prompt that we ran, into now a new chat in this project space, and it should be able to reference all the data that we gave it inside of the instructions to create basically the same thing that we would have gotten from the second prompt that we ran, except without the extra context here. It pulls this context from the instructions that we gave it originally when we set up the project. Now, you can imagine going forward, anytime you want to do a chat with Meridian Creative and all the project files, you can just jump into that project and then create it accordingly. And so the output should look something like this, and you get this information that's really nice and obviously is very similar to the one that we ran before. So the next level is level 3, where we talk a little bit about skills. All you have to think of a skill as is a playbook that can be reused in the future over and over again. This is ultimately extremely powerful when you have teams that require the same level of rigor / process when generating things. The easiest example is to think about this as generating a report. Let's say you came up with a really good way to use AI or Claude to generate a report for you by sifting through all of your data inside of an SQL database or your CRM or whatever, and it generates an end of day report for you. That process of coming up with all of the steps to generate that report and the places to look and the data sources to look in and the connections to make can be saved as a snapshot as what we call a skill. And that skill in the future, anytime you want to rerun the generation of that report, like an end of days, whatever, you just run that skill. You don't have to go through the hoo-ha of trying to figure out where to pull data from. And then the same thing goes, you can pass that skill to your teammates that can then use it as well for whatever they need to. So now what I'll do to create the skill, which is super simple, I'll just ask Claude, create a skill for generating this build decision and save it. And that's it. Within a few moments, it'll create the skill for me and you'll see it saved as skill.md. So after a few minutes, I think it took about 2 minutes or just under 2 minutes, it creates the skill, build decision brief skill, and it has all of this great information, including an example based on what it did before, and saves it as a skill. Now what I can do is click save skill, obviously, and then I can do build decision brief / build decision brief, and any new chat I want will have this skill accessible to it. And I can send this and pass it along to my teammates, as I mentioned before. So it keeps consistency throughout, especially in a company setting where it's super important to have that level of consistency and repeatability. So level 4 is Cowork, where we're actually going to automate this task. You'll see a little tab here that says chat in Cowork for every chat that you create. And you can, I'm just gonna paste this in, run this first as a manual task in a dedicated demo account with a manual approval mode, enable only the first required Google connectors and review every tool call, don't schedule. So a whole bunch of stuff that I'm asking it for. The most important thing is that I say create a recurring Friday operating brief for the fictional Meridian Creative pilot. Each Friday at 3 p.m. do these things, these 5 things. Review only the approved demo Google Drive folder called Meridian Pilot, summarize completed work, link every item, create a Word document, and then draft an email. Once I hit send, this will go ahead and set it all up for me and then just run it at Friday every day at 3 p.m. You can already start to see, based on this, how powerful this flow is. Now, I'm not gonna, I'll actually run this really quickly and then I can delete it right after. It may take a moment to run. You'll see this the first time that you're using Cowork. It takes a brief moment to kind of set up. But what's very cool about Cowork is that you actually do not need any infrastructure to run these jobs. Historically, software engineering, if you wanted to run a job, a deterministic job on an ongoing process, you would have to set up a cron job just being something that can run on a recurring schedule, and then you would have to write the code in order to do it. In this way here, you don't have to do any of that, right? It's going to ask you for some connections. I'm going to go ahead and set up mine really quickly. I have a bunch of emails that I've connected to Claude and have seemed to be expired now, so I'm going to go ahead and just link that. It won't actually work properly because I'm asking it for a specific folder called Meridian Pilot, but you can imagine if you had that folder in Google Drive, it could find that. And yeah, so anyways, it says it doesn't exist. Once this is set up properly, it'll be able to do all of that for you and it'll set it up and run perfectly. So just remember this whenever you tackle a task with Claude the next time. Firstly, if it only needs to live in one chat, just use the chat. If you need to have data that is spread across a workspace, use a project. If you need a repeatable, kind of reusable playbook, use a skill. Then if you need something automated that requires tool access, use Cowork. And that's it. Beginner to pro does not mean moving every task into Cowork. Then finally, if the work needs to move across approved tools or run again later on a recurring basis, that's when Cowork can earn the extra setup. But every layer can preserve also the wrong thing. A project can preserve stale context, a skill can repeat a flawed method, and an agent with broad permissions can repeat the wrong action at scale. So choose the lightest level that preserves the part that you would otherwise rebuild. Keep your sources current and then test the method before you trust the repeatability. And finally, keep human approval whenever the cost of being wrong becomes too real. I've linked the exact prompts, fictional files, custom skill, and source ledger below so you can try the same ladder safely. So the next time you're about to write an enormous prompt or give another agent permission, pause and ask, what actually needs to survive after this prompt? That answer will tell you which level to start using. If this was helpful, drop a like and subscribe below so you don't miss the next one. See ya.